Hey, this is TrueNews365.com. Thanks for joining me once again. Today I just want to feature a commentary on a commentary. Doug Wilson's commentary on Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin's interview on same-sex fatherhood. And I wanted to bring up a point that I felt was not mentioned to profound effect that I think is extremely important, despite Doug Wilson really getting deeper into it. Of course, I know he understands these things, but it really wasn't stressed out in his video. And the one thing that I think that two issues that I thought that really should have been hammered on a lot more and ironed out a lot more. One, understanding the profundity of the theology behind why same-sex marriage cannot be. And number two, the fact that we should move forward as Christians, moving forward, recognizing and having a better understanding that oftentimes conservative talking heads just do not have the same interest and are not leading and are not allowing Christian voices to be heard. Because perhaps they're either too extreme or whatever. As it turns out, they end up doing exactly what the left does to the right, typically, and that is to minimize and marginalize the voice. Okay, so oftentimes you will see this for whatever reason, and there are some good talking heads. It's not a problem listening to them in terms of political things that are going on in the culture and stuff like that, but we need to have it in our forefront of our consciousness that Christians need to start supporting each other, stop relying so much on the mainstream conservative talking heads to push things forward. We need to start adapting and getting together and uplifting ourselves, and need to stop. We need to start growing in numbers and power in terms of the gospel and projects and all type of efforts that need to be done in order to get the message out for the culture, because we need to seize the culture for the name of Christ. Okay, so listen to my commentary, and I'm sure that Doug Wilson's commentary will be attached as well, so that way you can really listen to how Jordan Peterson deals with this issue as best as he could, really, because he's not a Christian man, but he does understand a lot of these issues from a conservative point. My issue is that he can only go but so far in understanding the complete truth about the issue concerning same-sex fatherhood. So just check that out, and check out now my commentary as well. Okay, talk to you soon. So I added the video of Douglas Wilson reviewing the interview with Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin being homosexual, and he's been a spokesperson. He's one of these, and I've seen more and more every single day. Homosexuals aligning with conservatism and supposedly coming out of the wokeness. One thing that in the video Doug Wilson doesn't really get into, that has to be, he does touch on it when he says that it is marriage cannot be a two men at home with a baby, that type of deal. That's really what he means, but I don't think he hammered it out or ironed it out with more emphasis. Basically, the main problem in that whole conversation, once we see that video, which is a really good commentary by Douglas Wilson, is that the fact is that, okay, well, they try to compare, and they do, they really do a number on trying to focus, and Rubin really sneaks it in there, which I expected to do. He basically, by clockwork, he brought up the whole idea, well, a man could be a drunk and still be a good father and blah, 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 but nobody's perfect. And they're talking about this whole idea about flattening the ideal, okay, where you can't flatten the ideal, where all of a sudden it makes no difference, where they're basically flattening the ideal of the standard. But the problem is that if you're struggling with the standard, why do we have the standard? The reason why we have the standard is for two main reasons. Number one, because God is the one who's in charge, who commands, who created, and who created the institution of marriage. He's the one that not only defines it, but then you have the whole spirituality behind the representation of what marriage is. And so homosexuality completely perverts that. It completely because marriage isn't just a man and a woman, creating kids, and that's just part of the whole symbolism behind Christ and his church. Okay, and the structure of the structure of the order that he has for mankind. So, I mean, theologically speaking, it's such a profound thing to basically pervert, really, by two men and a baby, you see? And it goes way beyond the fact that, well, he's a nice person. He pays his taxes. He's a polite person, soft-spoken, well-dressed, proper, and, he just happens to be, alternative lifestyle or whatnot. So it goes light years beyond that. And that's what people just fail to understand all the time. And I don't think that interview brought out that profundity out of that. Doug Wilson, perhaps, because of lack of time, he couldn't really get into that. Whereas I know for a fact that he knows that. Now, the problem with Jordan Peterson is, whereas the bulk of his analysis is what you have here, a person who's a conservative, who's not a Christian, who cannot add the profundity of theological understanding behind that. He can just use practicality. But while Jordan Peterson is sitting there, basically finding himself contradicting himself with this whole flatten the standard situation, and he finds himself contradicting himself and perhaps not even realizing that he's doing it, what happens is that he's adding a pragmatic understanding to a system and a standard that he really, since he's not really Christian, can't really defend. If you really push him to the limit, he really can't. And perhaps that's why inevitably he has to compromise. And he has to compromise on understanding that, well, what is wrong with that person? No, Dave Rubin will capitalize on the fact that, there's some people may not fall according to that standard of goodness, but yet they can still be a father to a child and still be homosexual, depending on the character of that person. See, that's the argument that's being laid out. And so the fact is that we can't argue that point outside of deep theological understanding in order to make the point of why it's perverted and why it cannot be a marriage. It cannot be a marriage to a homosexuality cannot be in marriage. And that's why it can't. That's what needs to be stressed constantly. In other words, you have to insist on understanding a theological principle, a theological profundity, in order to argue the point. Because if not, then you're going to be caught. I apologize for the motorcycle in the background. If you don't argue based on the profundity of the theological implications of that, then what happens is that you cheapen the argument and you end up being a Jordan Peterson, who's probably the best of the conservatives who could perhaps talk these points, but he himself falls short of it because he can't go deeper into the theological attributes of these things, you see? And so all he can do is be Mr. Conservative, who himself, because he can't touch the theological deepness of what marriage actually is, all he can do is go back into the history of what has flourished up until now in humanity. That's all he can. That's as far as he can go. But he doesn't realize that, okay, what might seem to flourish or what might seem to work in one or two generations does not flourish in totality with humanity, number one. And number two is the profundity of the theological implications of what marriage actually is, according to the Creator who instituted it. Okay? And it can't be blessed. And so the fact that the homosexual, no matter how prim and proper they are, and gentle and great, outstanding citizen he is, he's going to be judged by the Creator himself for not just falling behind on a standard, but by blaspheming the institution, the holy institution of God, which is marriage. And that's really the profundity of the situation. So anyone who talks about this argument, talks about this marriage situation, and they try to get you caught in that moralistic slippery slope, which is what it seems, you have to basically tell them you can't, because there's theological implications that I don't know if you can possibly understand, because you can't understand it without recognizing how holy this God is, and how many people who have not come to faith and who have not faced Christ himself, spiritually speaking, are able to even do that. That's the question. And so from that point on, you may not be able to get an understanding of how deeply perverted the institution is being committed to, and so that was my follow-up commentary of his commentary, which is a very good commentary, and it's a Jordan Peterson. As much as conservatives love Jordan Peterson, but I call all Christians to basically step away and align away and delete and stop following these conservative talking heads, because they're not Christian. The Daily Wire is Jewish. And I think most people already understand that. But the fact is that the message moving forward is something of power. It's the gospel. And concerning the moving forward in society, in the culture today, and if we want a pure and unadulterated message, we can't be blending it and having people confuse it with just common conservatism. Because you got the crazy alt-right, far-right nonsense, horns breaking into things, situations, and then you've got, the ones with the cultural conservatives and stuff like that really just do not understand. They all call themselves Christian, but there needs to be there needs to be a distinction, and it needs to be a very profound distinction. It needs to be something that people can identify for a fact and recognize, well, no, those aren't conservatives, those are Christians. Okay? And that's the goal, moving forward for the sake of the culture, as we seize the culture now for Christ Jesus, who is King. And so, thanks for this, listening to my commentary on this issue. Follow up at TrueNews365.com. Until next time, talk to you soon. Bye.